Hello, good day everyone. This is Joe Brand. This is the Free Mind. So, thank you so much for supporting my channel, for watching all my videos. So, for today's discussion is I'll be discussing to you the lesson 2 in the subject of the Philippine Indigenous Communities. So, we will be focusing now on the Philippine prehistoric period. So, we will be going back in time. Okay? So, the purpose of this discussion is for you to have a short glimpse of the lives of the people in the Philippines and for us to appreciate the beauty of our prehistoric cultural system. And I know there are certain aspects of our prehistorical cultural system that we tend to forget because of a lot of influences that we are now encountering. But in this discussion, I hope that you will get something out of it, and I hope that you will learn a lot from this discussion. So we will start now, okay? At the people of indigenous community, because they are the ones who are preserving their own identity. They are the ones who are trying to preserve their own cultural heritage. And if you want to know how our early Filipinos uh, culture, we need to focus on those people who are less tainted ones, not with those people who are influenced by a lot of things. So, for example, I will not focus on myself if I want to understand the Philippine prehistoric period. I will try to focus on the people who are less tainted ones, who are preserving their own identity. Because that's the only time for us to appreciate that, yes, they are the most qualified people, or they are the most valued people, because they are trying to preserve their own selves, not to be influenced by other people or the colonizers. Okay? So when you talk about the Philippine indigenous people, they are also called indigenous cultural communities. So what do you mean by the indigenous cultural communities? It means that these are the people who can retain their culture, who can retain their belief and practices and even their physical appearance despite the colonizers. So kung ingon day kag indigenous community or indigenous cultural community, these are the people who can preserve their own identity, who can preserve their own culture, their belief, their practices, and even their physical appearance. So that is our cue when you try to understand the Philippine prehistoric period. Okay, so what you will learn here is not an absolute reality. So what you will learn here is not an absolute reality. It is because you will only see one dimension, a part of one aspect of this dimension. So let's be open-minded and be critical. So that is the main idea here, because if you want a detailed discussion, we can't do it one time. It's a long story to tell. So in here, in this discussion, so we will try to shorten that idea to get something out of this very quick discussion. So let's go back in time. Before the arrival of the colonizers, early Filipinos already encountered trading with other nationalities. So they are good at it. They love to trade. We already receive a lot of migrants from different countries like Southeast Asia. So let's try to embrace that idea that before the colonizers came, early Filipinos like us, we are so equipped with trading. We know how to trade, and we also accept migrants. So I think it's part of our history. So when the Malay came in the archipelago, so they form a unit, a political unit or a social organization called the Balangay or the Barangay. So I think we are still practicing that idea, no, the barangay. So we also have that one up to now. So it is the influence of the Malay when they came in the shores of the archipelago. They tried to form a social organization called the Balangay or the Barangay. So these groups of people or the barangay itself, they are not political units. These are more like social units. So when you talk about barangay or balangay before, these are not merely political units. It's merely of a social organization or a social unit. So why it is called the social unit, the barangay or the balangay? It is because most of the community members, they are related by blood. So this is called a kin-based community, no? So they are trying to form a social organization, and most of the members are all related by blood. Okay, this means that when you talk about social unit, so everything you owned, so everything is owned collectively. So what do I mean by this? So tanan nga naa nimo is not for your own self, it's for the good of other people also. So it's not it everything is owned collectively and no private ownership. So before before no we have that one. So they form a social unit because everything you see, everything is owned collectively, not a private ownership. So that is the main idea. That is the main idea about the Philippine prehistoric period. So because of that, so they also have this so-called the rulers. So part of the barangay or the balangay, they have rulers. Rulers, they are very respective. So they earned bigger respect of the people because they are the rulers of the barangay or the balangay. Okay, so next of the ruler is called the freemen. So the freemen, they are the ones who give assistance to the ruler, especially on the matters of community welfare. So there is a ruler, right, in the barangay. So there is a ruler who lead. Next is the freemen. The freemen are those people who give assistance to the ruler, and the last one is the dependent population, and that is us, right? And that is us. Therefore, the barangay is composed of a ruler, next is the freeman, and the dependent population. So it's just the same, no? Because we're also doing that. We have our own barangay and we have our chairman, the flow, the one that who leads, and then there are people like us, and there are also people who are giving assistance like I'm not familiar. I think it's a SK chairman, no? So that is how we do it. But if you're going to look at it, we are still applying the idea of the Philippine prehistoric period. We are still applying that until now. We have our own president, the vice president, and the senators. So we are still practicing that. So don't you know that don't you know that natives did not use money? Don't you know that indigenous people did not use money, right? So before, they did not use money. Instead, they lent and borrowed. For indigenous people, rice was so precious. So precious meaning we need to take a lot of risk and sacrifice. So that's why they just borrowed it and then they need to pay it after. So if but they're not gonna pay it using money. They're just gonna pay it by serving. Okay, so after you pay that one, if you are after you give off that service, so you are now free for the servitude. So that is the idea, no, that indigenous people now before our rice was so precious. So that is our thinking tool, no, the thinking box that rice was so precious before, and then the natives, the how early Filipinos deal about rice is they did not use money, they just lend it or borrowed it, and they have to pay it by giving off their own service. Okay, so that is how our early Filipinos do their own cultural system. Okay, next is the primitive economies or subsistence economies. Don't you know that people or the natives, they do not allow surpluses or surplus we are also fond of using that. We also have our own surplus, right? And after that, we sell and we put it in a lower price. But before, but before the eye, but before the eye, the primitive people, they are not into, it is not geared to exchange and profit, right? Because you are trying to lower down the price, that is surplus. But the primitive people is, they don't allow surplus. Try to see the cultural system, how our early Filipinos do their cultural, the prehistoric cultural system. So let's talk about change, but it's only limited to one group or within that group. So this is how we practice now, because before we also have this kind of barter. So the barter one is a perfect example of how our cultural system has been used up until now. So that is the idea of our cultural system. There are certain aspect of our cultural system before that we are still using now, like the online barter. So if I have a cell phone, if I am not gonna use that one, so I'll just transfer it or try to ask someone to replace it for something that is valuable to me, something that I can use about it. So that is the idea of our Philippine prehistoric cultural system. Not all prehistoric societies are farmers. They are hunters. Okay, so not all people from the natives or the primitive people are all farmers. They are also hunters. So they hunt and gather food for immediate consumption. That's why, as what you can see, if you're trying to look back in time, people from the primitive area, the people from the indigenous community, they are good hunters. Okay, so they they are also called egalitarian. So egalitarian means that if you are part of this community, members have a fair share of responsibilities and equal distribution of resources depending on the local community. So if you are part of the societies or the egalitarian, so you have a fair share of whatever, you have a fair share of the things that they are using. Example, for the food, for the responsibilities, so you will have that also. Okay, so and feed a lot of people, they will likely become a leader because of his contribution to the group's well-being. So in short, when you talk about the Philippine prehistoric system or the cultural system of the Philippines, is for me, we are still practicing that one, especially if you try to go into the primitive or the people from the indigenous community. So they are into that, and we can't blame them if they are still practicing that one, because they are trying to preserve their own identity, and they are trying to retain their belief, their practices, and their own prehistoric cultural system. And that is the beauty of understanding and knowing our prehistoric period, because this is the time where we tend to appreciate the our cultural system and how we do or act before the colonizers came, and how our early Filipinos do the same thing up to now. Okay, so I hope you get something out of this discussion. Thank you so much for watching. And thank you so much for supporting me, for subscribing my channel, for for sending your comments to me. I really appreciate that. And thank you. And I'll see you again for my next video. Thank you so much and God bless.